We're here this afternoon to address the current cycle of violence between Israelis and Palestinians. It's the latest in a long, brutal and inhumane conflict that has taken an unspeakable human toll. I've spoken on the situation in the Shannon already this week, and in the UN Security Council, and in a meeting of EU foreign ministers also. Let me repeat here in the House my calls for an immediate cessation of violence. Indiscriminate rocket attacks from Gaza must stop. Israeli airstrikes must stop. Over 120 civilians in the Gaza Strip have been killed in the last 10 days. 63 of them children. Among the 12 civilians killed in Israel, 2 of them children. This is shameful and will reinforce and embed hatred and grief and a continuance of what drives this conflict into the future. Today, as we debate in this chamber, there are 57,000 people who have been displaced by hostilities in Gaza and who are now taking refuge in almost 60 schools, many of them UN facilities, in an effort to find safe refuge for themselves, their families, and their children. The protection of civilians must be paramount, and the impact on civilians, and in particular children, has simply not been acceptable, and the international community must call it out. Yesterday I spoke to the Palestinian Prime Minister Shtayyeh, and expressed Ireland's condolences at the deaths and violence of the past week. Ireland has been urging the Security Council to use its voice. The Council has met 4 times since the outbreak of hostilities. I have to be honest with you, I find it difficult to comprehend how the UN Security Council has not yet been able to agree a clear joint statement on this issue. The global structure for preventing conflict and bringing conflict to an end, on a conflict as significant as this one, unable to even call for a ceasefire until now. I addressed the Security Council on Sunday and underlined that we need to send a clear and united message that the Council and its members have a responsibility to speak. Ireland is working closely with France on intensive negotiations in New York today to agree a Security Council resolution. And I will be meeting later this afternoon with my French counterpart here in Dublin on this issue. I sincerely hope that all Council members will come to the table constructively to try and reach agreement. The UN Security Council must speak on this issue. The President of the UN General Assembly has also convened the General Assembly today. This reflects the widespread concern amongst UN member states. The conflict is of particular concern to neighbouring states, many of whom have been at the forefront of efforts to try to secure a ceasefire in recent days. I've been in close contact with my counterparts in the region, whether it's Egypt, whether it's Qatar, or whether it's Jordan. I've urged all states to use their influence with parties to support efforts to end hostilities. Yesterday, I met the Foreign Minister of Iran, Minister Zarif. I made the point very clearly to him that Iran has a responsibility to use their influence in the Gaza Strip to insist on a ceasefire and an ending of violence and the firing of rockets. EU foreign ministers met virtually on Tuesday in an emergency setting. I called for a clear EU message in support of an immediate ceasefire and for humanitarian access to Gaza. I have to say I welcome the High Representative Joseph Borrell's clear call for a cessation to violence, the implementation of a ceasefire in order to protect civilians, and also to give full humanitarian access to those most in need in Gaza. Beyond securing a ceasefire and humanitarian access, we must also address the root causes of this ongoing cycle of violence. It was clear, I was clear on this at the Foreign Affairs Council on Tuesday, and the EU has a responsibility to step up. This is in our neighbourhood, and we need to be a much more influential actor than we are currently being. As I said, this afternoon I'm meeting my French counterpart, Jean-Yves Le Drian. We will discuss how we can work together at an EU level and at a UN Security Council level to support all efforts to de-escalate. And looking ahead, how can we reinvigorate the international community's commitment to the Middle East peace process and restart badly needed negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians on the basis of equality of esteem, which we have not seen now for a number of years. The loss of life, the destruction, and the trauma that we've seen in the last week across Israel and Palestine has been horrifying, but it needs to be a wake-up call for the international community in terms of our responsibilities. Nowhere is this more evident than in the Gaza Strip, where 2 million people were already living in acute humanitarian need, suffering the consequences of repeated cycles of violence and long-running blockades. That's why I've announced an immediate response of €1.5 million in emergency supports for the deteriorating situation in the Gaza Strip. Irish Aid will support the UN in delivering emergency humanitarian supplies to those who most need it. 1 million will be provided to UNRWA, who provides services to Palestinian refugees for emergency food, water and sanitation supplies, and health and psychosocial services for 50,000 people sheltered in UNRWA-run schools. UNICEF will also receive €500,000 for child protection, medical and sanitation services for thousands of children in acute need. This includes emergency psychosocial services to 5,000 children suffering trauma as a result of hostilities. And we will respond further to the humanitarian situation in the weeks ahead. This is additional money, by the way, to the money that we already provide to organisations like UNRWA and other UN actors. While much of the focus today is rightly on the violence and tension in Gaza, the West Bank and across Israel, we cannot and must not shy away from the enabling factors to this recent tragic cycle of violence. And I have to say that is primarily Israel's continued strategy of expanding settlements and the discriminatory practices by Israeli authorities against Palestinians. Forced relocation, demolitions of properties, forced evictions, and continuing to expand settlements that aren't legal in the first place. Once the immediate hostilities have ended, we cannot go back to the status quo as it was a few weeks ago. I remain supportive of a two-state solution, but it cannot be delivered if Israel's actions on settlements, demolition and evictions continue unabated. Brutality and dispossession will not lead to a peaceful, secure outcome for anybody, for Palestinians in a future state of their own, or for Israelis who want to live in peace with their neighbours as well. Ireland will continue to use our voice at the Security Council to draw attention to these issues. We will speak up, even if it's not comfortable to do so. We will continue, along with our EU partners, to engage in renewed and reinvigorated international and regional efforts, which are more necessary now than they have been for many years. Thank you, and I'll hand